I'm Ana Maria Salazar. Thank you so much for joining us here on Living in Mexico. Those of you who've been following us throughout the years know that we've been following very closely Mexico's energy policies. And of course, when you talk about Mexico's energy policies, you clearly have to talk about Pemex. And throughout the years, we've talked about the different reforms that have taken place in Pemex, trying to make it into a viable company. And, you know, well, you know what I'm talking about. I mean, Pemex as a company that, as a governmental company, has gone through its ups and downs, and there's always that big question mark: is it viable? And if you've been following this show for the last couple of months, we've been asking the question, could Pemex bring down Mexico's economy? Well, there's a couple news bites that came out in the last 2 weeks that I think we need to address. One has to do with the rating cuts that Pemex took about a week and a half ago. And the second news that came out, which I think is very interesting, is the fact that the Mexican government has condoned Pemex, a big chunk of Pemex taxes. And of course, it sounds very confusing because I'm still confused. I know that's why I always appreciate today's guest, Miriam Grustein. Miriam is, as you know very well, she's an energy expert and she's been joining us throughout the years. Miriam, a lot to talk about regarding Pemex. Welcome to the show. Where do you want to start?
Well, I would start by mentioning that is Pemex viable? We've been talking about this for about 15 years since you and I
Yeah.
first
Mm-hmm.
rating, and we always admonish and foresee Pemex as a demise, and it just doesn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
And what happened because Pemex can run with losses.
Mm-hmm.
And Pemex run with losses because it has full governmental support. And one of the issues that we're seeing now with governmental supports is the removal of the obligation for Pemex to pay taxes, especially derechos,
Mm-hmm. Right.
from EMP contracts for the next months.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Because they want to give Pemex a tax break. Also, Lorenzo Meyer Jr., he personally told me that he proposed, as a former board member of Pemex, that the state should rescue Pemex to have
Mm-hmm.
PROA, which I
Mm-hmm.
think somewhat of a salutary remedy if Pemex were to produce, but as you are very well aware,
Right.
that the president submitted as a bill to amend the constitution, consisting that Pemex does no longer have to be a profitable company, that it has
Mm-hmm.
to be dedicated to the better good. So,
Well,
should payers save Pemex if it's not making a profit, if it's not
mm-hmm.
financial? I think that's a major question.
I mean, the whole reason for Pemex to be a national company, or the reasoning behind it was that that Mexico could benefit from oil production and as a way of incrementing access to resources for all, for infrastructure, for healthcare, for schools. I mean, the idea of Pemex was that the benefits of Pemex would not go to a private company, but it would be the benefit of the entire Mexican population, and that instead of paying taxes, instead of to use these to use the benefit for Mexico. And of course, there's this national security argument of energy independence. So now we have a Pemex that's clearly indebted, and that it is really not, like they say in Spanish, aportando. It's not really benefiting or helping to subsidize or to support social programs. So what does Mexico get out of having one of the most indebted if not the most indebted oil companies in the world.
Well, Pemex still produces 90% of Mexico's oil.
Mm-hmm.
It imports nearly 70% of Mexico's um, gasoline.
Gasoline, right.
Further on, it imports a substantial amount of natural gas together with
Mm-hmm.
CFE.
Mm-hmm.
So Pemex's value is null, isn't true.
Mm-hmm.
The problem with this is that it performs these activities, or it engages in these benefits for Mexico at a loss.
Mm-hmm.
A loss in first place for Pemex. So that is a true problem. So if Mexico would let go of Pemex tomorrow, it wouldn't be a political gesture, or it would have high social costs.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It is what we have, and
Mm-hmm.
the result of Lopez Obrador's energy policies are leaving the country. So that's highly problematic. Bound to have nothing.
Mm-hmm. So, the let's just talk briefly of what the impact of this, of what's been called a fiscal stimulus for Pemex, which consists of a tax credit, which is equivalent to 100% of the company's profit sharing, right?
Right.
And that means that Mexico will not be Mexico's coffers will not be receiving these taxes that are important at a time where there's a lot of programs that need to be paid for, especially with these social programs that do require input, and I don't know if necessary in cash, but the Mexican government needs to have access to money. Um, so how do what do you think about the impact on Mexico's coffers if Pemex is not paying taxes? And it may go on for a while. I know you talked about 3 months, but I was reading up on some other analysts who think this could go on for quite a while.
With For quite a while, it is unsustainable. It doesn't if Mexico doesn't undergo a deep fiscal reform.
Right.
Taxing the very rich in
Mm-hmm.
Mexico, and that, I think, is politically unviable.
Right.
If not, as you say, that Mexico's credit rating might be heavily affected by Pemex's credit
Mm-hmm.
rating, reduced to high risk by Moody's.
Right.
Like
Right.
so,
Right.
so we're between a rock and a hard place when it comes to Pemex.
So, just to remind our audience, a week ago, Moody's Investor Services cut the ratings for Pemex bonds from B3 to B1, pushing Pemex into much more speculative investment, or I don't know, junk status. What would have to happen for Pemex to improve its ratings then? Because then it's going to be much more expensive to get loans. I mean, they're trying to sell these bonds, which apparently are doing well, but I'm sure that the fact that, that Bank's ratings gone down it's not good for bonds, or even, a midterm view of Mexico's economy.
Well, Pemex bonds are doing well because the interest rate is extraordinary.
Right.
Interest rate is extraordinary in relation with the risk involved.
Mm-hmm.
So if I were buying bonds, and I like to buy bonds that are
Mm-hmm.
bonds or
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't go to B minus bonds, even because Pemex has a history of default. So any investor with any track record knows that even the Fed Treasury bonds have a risk. What if the
Mm-hmm.
Fed goes bankrupt? Which sounds like an absurdity, but it may
Mm-hmm.
happen. No?
Mm-hmm.
It may happen, and Pemex might really go. They say that's technically bankrupt. Technically
Mm-hmm.
means numbers, according to the real numbers, it should be in bankruptcy. The problem
Mm-hmm.
is that the state cannot go bankrupt
Mm-hmm.
to constitutional provision. but
Yeah, I mean, I mean, it technically can't go bankrupt, but in reality, Mexico stops paying its debts. You know what I mean? There's a point where just keeping Pemex going is such a burden on the Mexican economy that there could be a cut in the ratings of Mexico's sovereign debt.
they communicate directly. It's like a baby in the womb,
Right, right.
It's, you don't know who the mother is. Before, we thought the mother was Pemex because it was supplying the country with nearly 50% of its tax burden. But
Hmm.
now, I as I recall from the latest numbers, it's providing 15%
Right.
of the tax burden. So it's minimal. But if we let
Hmm.
go, we'll be left with nothing because the private sector is recoiling as a result of Andres Manuel energy policies.
Right. No, no. We ran out of time. We're going to, of course, continue talking about this. I mean, I thought we would be spending much more time talking about the electoral process in the next, in the last 2 or 3 months. But, there's just so much news that has to do with the constitutional reforms. It has to do with organized crime and security. And of course, now Pemex has been making headlines lately. And I always appreciate when you can spend some time talking to us. Miriam Grustein, energy expert. I always enjoy you joining us here on Living in Mexico. Thank you so much.
Much, Ana Maria. Take care.
Take care. Let's go to a break. I'm Ana Maria Salazar, and you're listening and watching Living in Mexico. Don't go away. I'll be right back.